The Super El Niño cannot be looked at in isolation because it is one of the tipping points caused by anthropogenic climate change. So suggesting that it is natural does not take into account the additional heating caused by carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide released into the atmosphere through fossil fuel usage, industrial processing, agribusiness, and the destruction of nature, which is one of Earth's largest carbon sinks. The Super El Niño arrives at an awkward time during a fuel and fertilizer crisis, and therefore an agricultural crisis. But we were already in an agricultural crisis caused by changed seasons, caused by anthropogenic climate change. The Straits of Hormuz crisis is also a food, farming, and supply chain crisis for Europe, Africa, and Asia, but not China. The Gulf crisis will mean that the price of oil will remain high. The Straits of Hormuz will remain closed for those countries not wishing to trade on Iran's terms. And as part of the poly crisis, with anthropogenic climate change and overshoot making our predicament even more precarious. The Super El Niño is part of anthropogenic climate change. Our oceans absorb vastly more heat than the land, and this heat is cycled by ocean currents between the equator and the poles, the surface and deep ocean, cycling nutrients, moving heat, cooling the planet, and creating macroclimates. The surface warming in the tropical Pacific, which is signaling a potential Super El Niño in 2026, is primarily caused by a combination of westerly wind bursts and the weakening of the trade winds, and subsequently a massive oceanic Kelvin wave transporting heat from the western Pacific to the east. This phenomenon represents a rapid collapse of the previous multi-layer La Niña phase, with human-caused global warming likely accelerating the heat recharge process. The entire El Niño-La Niña process are also known as the ENSO, or the El Niño Southern Oscillation. It's disingenuous to represent this rapid warming as natural, and preppers who do have an agenda which seems primarily to misinform themselves and their fan club. In doing so, they misunderstand the risks that these extreme weather events represent. Confirmation bias based on political ideology can never offer an adequate explanation for the climate crisis. The Super El Niño is an anthropogenic climate change-driven event and contributor to the collapse of the AMOC, or Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. While the primary driver of the AMOC weakening is global warming, specifically the influx of fresh water from melting ice, a Super El Niño acts as a temporary high-impact stressor that exacerbates this long-term trend. Both will significantly impact agriculture in Western Europe. A slowing and eventual collapse of the AMOC could plunge Britain into a climate similar to that of Finland, with the additional of summers with lethal wet bulb temperatures and winters of negative 20 degrees. The strong El Niño for 2026 could accelerate AMOC collapse. The implications for Super El Niño are unsurvivable temperatures in sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East and South Asia, and the Far East. Temperatures of 52 degrees C have already been recorded in Kuwait. Pakistan has already had temperatures in excess of 40 degrees C. What increases the lethality of high temperatures is humidity. The wetter the atmosphere, the less effective the human body's ability to cool itself. Humans cool themselves through sweat and evaporation. Wet bulb temperatures are important because they are potentially lethal. Failure to recognize that hot, sunny weather kills with humidity has nothing to do with hydration. The Ministry of Defence, following the inquiry into the deaths of servicemen on the Brecon Beacons in 2013 from heat exhaustion caused by wet bulb temperatures during a heat wave, now have a policy for exercises and training that if the combination of humidity and temperature exceed wet bulb thresholds, they use a special thermometer to measure this, and if If the temperatures are in the wet bulb threshold, physical activity is postponed or moved to an indoor air-conditioned area. Understanding wet bulb temperature risk is a tactical advantage, but it is missed by most people who refuse to address man-made climate change. Without an external means to cool off, wet bulb temperatures are killers, and Kevin Hester has already identified in his blog that wet bulb temperatures will be one of the biggest drivers of climate-related deaths. Podcasters and survivalists who think that climate change is BS miss the point, and as I've already said, misinform their followers. So how can we prep for the unsurvivable? We can adapt, and look at edible staples which can adapt as well. Wet bulb survival means staying out of the heat, drinking ice-cold drinks, covering up in the sun, doing less activity. The most vulnerable people are the very young, the elderly, and the ignorant. Wet bulb temperatures in the UK are not natural. There's nothing awake about pretending that climate science is a myth.
Riots happening, the food bank's not going to be enough. We're going to do when, as I say, the supermarkets are empty of food. The food banks will need to talk to each other, need to be in a network. So another place where people can put energy is to finding other people that want to think and prepare around collapse and what infrastructure is going to be needed. And the food banks will be part of it. Knowing where the local health providers are is also necessary. Where the ceremonialists, the people that can take grief.